All right, this is on the Shia LaBeouf He Will Not Divide Us stream. I'm sure some of you have seen it. Maybe you saw little snippets of it, or maybe you went to the website and saw the live stream. It was very interesting. And I think we should all thank Shia LaBeouf for creating this demonstration of the divide in our culture. I think it's very fitting the way it turned out. I had never heard of Shia LaBeouf before this. I might have heard the name before, but it didn't stick in my mind. And I probably would have never known who Shia LaBeouf was if it wasn't for this stream. And this tells you something. It tells you that a lot of people are tuning out pop culture. I'm one of them, but I know I'm not the only person tuning this shit out. There is a divide in our culture, and I think people like Shia LaBeouf don't realize that they don't speak for the majority of the population. And I'm going to talk about that, and I think that's one of the things that this reveals, and that this election has revealed, that there is this divide. And that the people on the left, or you could say on the side of the establishment, you could really call them the religious left, totalitarian humanists, there are other terms you could use. Until recently, they were not aware that they had a significant opposition. And they have no idea, they still don't really have any idea about the nature of their opposition. They don't know who opposes them. I think Shia LaBeouf expected that almost everyone who came to the stream would be on his side, and this would be showing a kind of moral unity in opposition to Trump. And the left has been trying to do this, trying to display moral unity with these marches and protests and things like that. I imagine that what he expected was that people would go up to the camera and obediently chant his little mantra. He will not divide us. He will not divide us. He will not divide us. And some people did. There were some people who camped out in front of the camera and chanted that little mantra over and over again, monotonously. And it was really creepy, almost, this cult-like behavior. But other people showed up as well. And they didn't all agree with Shia LaBeouf. The so-called right-wing trolls started showing up to make fun of this project. You know, going up to the camera and saying things like 1488 or Hail Keck, or holding up pictures of Pepe or whatever, stuff like that. And so very early on, Shia lost control of his project, because he put it out there in the public space. And he was not prepared to deal with opposition. He wasn't prepared emotionally to deal with it. And so it seems like he lost his composure, his sanity almost, because he couldn't handle that people weren't agreeing with him. They weren't doing what he wanted, and they weren't agreeing. They weren't conforming, and they weren't obeying. And the totalitarian left has come to assume moral authority. They believe that their values are the definition of good, and everyone is morally compelled to obey them and conform to those values. And anyone who doesn't agree with them is either acting in bad faith, because they just can't grasp that some people legitimately, honestly, sincerely don't agree with them. Right? So if anyone disagrees with them, they have to assume that this person is acting in bad faith, or some kind of hick or religious nut or something like that. They can't handle a real disagreement. They can't handle a rational debate about their values, because their values are religious. This is a religion. And it has totalitarian goals. It believes that it has the truth, and it has the good, right? Its values are good by definition. And so it claims the right to impose them on everyone else. And it's very intolerant of anyone who doesn't want to go along with this project. Anyone who questions their values is evil. And that's really why the left, or again, I don't want to use the term left, but I don't have a better term. I'll just say left. The left is furious at Trump, not because of what Trump wants to do, which is not really that unreasonable. Trump doesn't have goals that are all that objectionable, really. Yeah, he wants to ban some Muslims, but other presidents have banned people on various grounds for, from various places, for various reasons, whatever. And it's not that. It's that Trump represents a rejection of their worldview. If Obama proposed the same kinds of policies, or Clinton proposed the exact same policies, but did so by saying, well, we have to do this now, it's like the new economic program or whatever, right? The NEP. Like Lenin could use capitalism because it was for the sake of communism. And if Hillary Clinton said, we have to keep out certain Muslims for now, but it's all for the greater glory of us all getting along, and it's just a temporary thing, they wouldn't mind. But what they sense in Trump is a rejection of their values. And that's what really pisses them off. And if you think about Trump, he wasn't so much the right-wing candidate, he was the anti-establishment candidate and the troll candidate. He campaigned as a heretic, as the guy who was willing to say unpopular things or politically incorrect things. He was willing to utter heresies. And that's what infuriates these people. It's not his actual policies. It's that he doesn't bow down to their gods. He doesn't submit to them, to their will, to their values. So, back to the stream. One day, Sam Hyde showed up, and he announced that he was going to be there. So a whole bunch of right-wing trolls showed up, and they had this big party, essentially. They were all having fun, counter-chanting, showing pictures, and saying funny things, and just goofing off in front of the camera. And there was this little group of dedicated leftists who were trying to maintain their monopoly on the camera, right? They didn't want to let these other people say anything. They didn't want them even to be seen, right? So they were trying, with their bodies and with their words, to censor the other point of view, to block it out, right? They didn't want these other people to go into this public space and say what they believed. And the crowd got very chaotic, but I don't think there was any violence or anything like that. There was a little bit of pushing and shoving, but not very much. But the museum and or the police decided to break it up. They put up a barrier. They divided people into groups, ironically, and they allowed them to go up to the camera in small groups that were ideologically separate or pure, ideologically purified. And they also discriminated against the right-wingers. Like, they would let left-wingers go up there and chant for 20 minutes, and then they would let a right-wing group go up and talk for 2 minutes. And this is reminiscent of the way the media has been acting and the way that the establishment left has been acting for years. They want to monopolize the conversation. They don't even want to have a conversation. They just want to preach, and if you don't agree with them, you must be shut up. And so that's what they have been doing for years. But when they go into a public space, like where the stream was, they can't control what people say. And so they had to shut it down. The stream lasted for, I guess, another week or maybe a week and a half or something like that. But it was dominated by right-wing trolls. It became a little hangout in New York City. They all used to hang out there and goof off and, just kind of make fun of the whole thing and express themselves publicly. And then finally, they shut down the stream entirely. So it didn't last very long. I don't think it lasted a month. But it was really interesting because it was kind of like a mini repeat of the election. And it tells you a lot about the current divide in our culture. The divide between the authoritarian, totalitarian left and this coalition of opposing views, I guess. You can just call it the right. But again, right and left don't really capture the essence of the difference. Like in the election, the left thought that they were going to win. They were sure that they were going to win. Because they didn't believe that many people would vote for Trump. Right? They had been ridiculing and demonizing these people for years. And they had been ridiculing and demonizing Trump in the mainstream media for the entire election cycle. So how could people still vote for Trump when they had clearly been told not to do it, when they had clearly been told that Trump was evil, and when Trump had been heretical? How could people vote for Trump? And yet they did. Right? A lot of people voted for Trump. And it wasn't just this little opposition they thought they had, The left has been ridiculing their opposition as a bunch of rednecks, evangelical Christians, ignorant people, etc., etc. And they never actually deal with the substance of their opponents' beliefs and arguments. They just try to shut them down. Right? That's what they have been doing for years. That's what political correctness is. It's an attempt to frame all discussion and debate in a way that denies any opposing viewpoint to the humanist worldview of the left. If you say anything that opposes them, then you're evil for saying it, and therefore you must be shut down. And we've seen, them try to shut down Milo Yiannopoulos and punching Richard Spencer in the face and all this stuff. And the reason that they're doing that is because they don't have anything else. They don't have any arguments. They don't know what to do. Because they've spent years ignoring their opposition. And they've been blindsided by the size of it and also by the power of it. And they're also being blindsided by reality. The world isn't turning out the way the left-wing worldview predicts that it should. They think that they're on the cutting edge of history and that their values are going to win. They are the future. The term progressive, right? It's like, well, we can go forward or we can go backward. Or we can, maybe dig in our heels and be dragged into the future. Either way, they believe that they are the future. And everyone who disagrees with them is stuck in the past. But the world isn't going in their direction, and they're starting to wake up to that fact. They're starting to wake up to the reality that they're not actually winning in the world. Their ideas aren't winning. But they don't want to examine their ideas. They don't want to question their ideas. They're ideologically committed to them. So what are they supposed to do? Well, you can see what they're doing. They're lashing out at everyone who disagrees with them. And they're also trying to find ways to explain away their loss. They're trying to explain it on the Russians or fake news. And that whole thing is ridiculous as well, the fake news idea. They just assume that the news that's on their side is true. And anything that opposes them is false. They don't try to falsify their own beliefs. They don't allow criticism of their beliefs. They don't listen to the other side. They don't listen to opposing views. So how do they know they're right? They don't. How do they know what's fake news if they won't even listen to it? It's just an attempt to define reality, right? To control what everyone else thinks and says. And it isn't going to work. And the main reason it's falling apart now is because of the internet. And you could really see that on the stream. The people who showed up, the right-wing trolls, were like internet culture in the flesh. They were basically trolling in person. They were shitposting in person in front of the camera. And what happened over the last, generation or so is that the left took over the cultural institutions of the West almost completely. They took over the academy, they took over the media, they took over the childhood education system. So little kids are indoctrinated into left-wing ideas from the time they're in kindergarten. And so they thought that they had attained cultural hegemony, that they had won, right? But what happened was that because they were, ignoring reality, and because their ideas are not based in reality or based on real experience, they're ideals that don't work, they had to push away the truth, right? They had to constantly fence in debate. They had to keep out opposing views. They couldn't deal with opposing views. They had to exclude certain data and certain interpretations to maintain their ideology. And so what happened was the institutions of the West have lost credibility. As they have become ideologically leftist, they have lost their credibility. And this other thing happened on the internet. An opposing counterculture emerged on the internet. And this has really been scaring them. That's where the culture war is taking place. It's taking place right here. It's taking place in the alternative media, the alternative academy, right? We don't have an alternative childhood education system, unfortunately, other than parents. But on the internet, you can't really control what people say, especially in anonymous forums. People can say whatever they want. There are no social consequences in the real world. And of course, this allows a lot of bad behavior. It allows a lot of real trolling. It allows people to be insulting and rude and all that stuff, crude, etc., etc. But it also allows them to tell the truth, or just to say what they really feel and what they really believe, and then to engage with the ideas of others and have debates and have discussions. So while the left was imposing their ideology on the institutions, the internet was this chaotic free-for-all of ideas. It was the so-called open market of ideas, where ideas have to compete. And it's not necessarily that the best ideas always win in that environment, but ideas have to be persuasive, and they have to be able to deal with criticism. So the left's ideas got weaker and weaker, more and more ideologically pure, and more detached from reality, while opposing views gained strength in this competitive environment where they had to struggle with one another. Professors can just preach from a podium. They have authority that's just granted to them by an institution. But someone on the internet doesn't have that luxury. They have to appeal to their audience, and they have to deal with criticism. So a counterculture emerged on the internet. And in that counterculture, you could find all the things that had been cut away from the mainstream culture by political correctness. You could find all the ideas that had been excluded by the left. You had all these different ideas out there competing, and also you had people practicing their arguments against the left over and over. And what happens almost on every occasion where you engage with a leftist online is they will block you. Almost every time they will block you. Some will just disengage without actually blocking you. But most will disengage. They will cut it short with some kind of insult that you're a bad person. You're either ignorant, uneducated, or you're evil. Right? And this is their way of dealing with cognitive dissonance. So the people on one side, the trolls, were developing their arguments. They were they were not only like learning things, they were actually learning about the world and learning the arguments that they could use to bring down the left, which isn't very hard, right? Because there are a lot of weaknesses in the worldview of the left. And people on the right were exchanging ideas. They were going over and over all of these things, going over the weaknesses in the left-wing worldview. You know, they were exchanging hate facts, exposing the contradictions of the left, the hypocrisy of the left, and they were also condensing their ideas and their arguments down to simple, persuasive forms. Memes, the so-called memes, you know, a little picture with some words that has a big impact and that propagates because it's funny or because it's true and it conveys a truth very concisely. So the right was learning how to compete and win in this environment, and all the left really had was institutional power. And that's what they've fallen back on again and again. They've tried to get government and big corporations to censor opposing views by labeling them as hate speech or trolling or abuse or misogyny or whatever. But that's all they've got. And when there is any public forum that allows for actual free speech, they are going to lose. And that's what happened on this stream. They lost not only because all they had was a stupid mantra. You know, it wasn't even entertaining. It wasn't even compelling. It was just boring. It was just like, look at these cultists chanting their mantra like retards. That's the left. It's a bunch of people jerking each other off, patting each other on the back for being good because they chant a mantra together. And that's it. It's a religious cult, but it's devoid of the merits of most religions. So that's what happened. The left made the mistake of thinking that because they controlled the cultural institutions, they controlled the culture. And instead of engaging with their opposition, instead of questioning their own ideas, or at least learning how to argue in favor of them, they chose to dismiss their opposition and push them away, push them out of the institutions, deplatform them, censor them, whatever. But that's hard to do, especially with the internet. What they ended up doing is isolating themselves from their opposition, and as a result, leftists don't know who their opposition is, and they don't know what they think. Whereas the opposing side is very aware of who the leftists are and what they think. We've been theorizing about them, we've been analyzing them, we've been coming up with counter-arguments and throwing them into the ether over and over and over. And unlike them, we don't get invited to the United Nations. But that's kind of an advantage. I mean, it's a slight disadvantage in a way, but it's also an advantage. Because it means that we have to actually be persuasive. We don't have the bully pulpit. We don't have all the big corporations and the academy and the media on our side. So we have only the power of thought and the power of words, or the power of memes, right? So we have to learn how to use that limited source of power. And that's what we have been doing. And that's why we are starting to win. And it's also because, you know, in this more open discourse space, there's more access to truth. The truth withers and dies when there's no competition of ideas. It's like they want to wall themselves off from reality so that it doesn't intrude on their beliefs. But no matter what, reality is going to come over that wall at some point. So that's where we are, and that's why the left is freaking out. They're freaking out because they have major cognitive dissonance. They're being forced to confront reality. They're being forced to confront their real opposition, not a straw man that Jon Stewart cooks up for The Daily Show, but a real opposition that is far more diverse, intellectual, entertaining, and persuasive than they are. I'm not saying that the right-wing trolls are right, that they have all the right ideas, or even that they have any of the right ideas. but they have the right method. And that method is discussion, debate, an open space in which ideas can compete. And the other side is just trying to force ideas onto everyone through institutions. And that's going to fail because people get sick and tired of it and they start rejecting those ideas. And then the institutions lose credibility. The more they try to shove politically correct bullshit down our throats, the more we're going to barf it up and say, fuck you. Thanks for listening.